Imagine waking up. No phone screen, no Wi Fi notification, no alarm sound you've been meaning to change for 6 months. Just cold ground, a fire, and 40 other humans staring at you from across the cave. You are 70,000 years in the past, and you are completely Gen Z. Here's the question nobody's asked. If you dropped an entire generation raised on TikTok, mental health discourse, and oat milk lattes into the world of early Homo sapiens, what would actually happen? Would they collapse in 3 days? Or would something strange occur? Something that even anthropologists didn't predict. Because when researchers started asking these questions seriously, the answers were nothing like what anyone expected. Here's what we know about Homo sapiens 70,000 years ago. They lived in bands of roughly 20 to 150 people. They hunted, they gathered, they slept on the ground, moved with the seasons, and faced a world where a bad week could mean starvation. And by every modern standard of comfort, it was brutal. And yet, here's where things get strange. When archaeologists study the cognitive profile of early Homo sapiens, something keeps coming up, a trait that made us different from every other species on Earth. They're obsessive storytellers. They didn't just survive, they sat around fires for hours, processing the day, interpreting dreams, building myths out of the moments of stars. Sound familiar? Researchers at the University of California found that the part of the human brain most activated during social storytelling, the default motor network, is the same region that lights up when someone scrolls through a social feed. The mechanism is almost identical, which means Gen Z, raised on narratives, aesthetics, emotional storytelling, memes that require 3 layers of context to understand, may have been accidentally training one of the oldest skills in human history. But here's where it gets stranger still. Let's actually put Gen Z in this world, not as a thought experiment, as a survival analysis, because anthropologists have a term for what made early human bands succeed: social cohesion. The groups that survived weren't necessarily the strongest. They were the ones who could maintain trust, resolve conflict, and communicate across complex emotional terrain fast. And here's what's fascinating. Gen Z, more than any generation before them, grew up inside systems designed to make them hyper aware of group dynamics. They learned to read tone through text, to detect sarcasm in a single punctuation choice, to navigate communities with unwritten rules that shifted daily. In other words, they trained without knowing it. But wait, there's a counter argument. Gen Z also grew up with the lowest recorded level of in present conflict. According to a 2023 PEW research analysis, Gen Z reports significantly higher rates of anxiety when facing direct confrontation, verbal or physical. In a world where disputes weren't settled in comment sections but with actual consequences, would that be fatal weaknesses? Some 70,000-year-old skeletons carry healed wounds, evidence of violence, evidence of survival. So, which wins, the social intelligence or the anxiety? And then researchers noticed something unusual, something hiding in how Gen Z actually behaves under genuine pressure. In 2020, something happened that no generation had experienced in a century. The world stopped, and Gen Z, many of them teenagers, didn't just cope, they created. They built communities from bedrooms. They launched movements from phones. They maintained emotional intimacy across distances that would have shattered previous notions of friendship. Psychologists studying adolescent development noted something unexpected. Gen Z showed a remarkable capacity for meaning making under uncertainty, which is almost word for word how anthropologists describe what early humans did after the Toba catastrophe. Around 74,000 years ago, a supervolcano eruption in Indonesia nearly wiped us out. Estimates suggest the global human population may have dropped to as few as 10,000 individuals. a genetic bottleneck, a near extinction. But what did those survivors do? They made art, they developed language, they told stories around fires to remind each other that they were still here. The capacity to find meaning in darkness, it didn't emerge despite catastrophe. It emerged because of it. So maybe the question isn't whether Gen Z could survive 70,000 years ago. Maybe the question is what part of them was already built for exactly this. If you really loved the video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And thank you for listening to the Oliver.